feelings of anxiety or panic or just sadness because of the pandemic, you feel weak, like there's these negative words that are associated with it, so you feel like, no, I need to rise above it. But if you allow yourself to feel it and you allow yourself to go through it, it comes and then it goes,
If you could mobilize a group of people, what movement would you mobilize and why?
I would call my movement the mindful movement. Suicide is one of the leading causes of death between people aged 15 and 29. 1 in 3 people are expected to suffer from mental illnesses in their lifetime. So I believe that mobilizing people to strive for mental health would actually fix so many social ills in our society. And that is what I would mobilize.
Focus on the small victories at all times. They build up momentum to the bigger victories. And you're not alone at any time if you feel like you're overwhelmed. SADC is here. They have a 24-hour counseling line where you can get someone to talk to or someone to help you. Hi, Chris.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm alive.
Yes, you're alive. We've been trying to get a hold of you, but finally you're here.
Sorry, apparently I'm not a very competent Instagrammer. I couldn't find the button on the computer, so now I'm on my phone.
Let me tell you, no, you can't find it on your computer. I've heard that you can't find it on your computer, so you have to use your phone. You have to use your phone so you can see that request button. Because if you're on your laptop, a lot of people.
Sorry.
No, it's fine. It literally happens to the best of us. Are you good today?
Yes, well, thank you. Sorry, I was just like, oh, I'm running your show, I need to get on there, what am I doing? I wouldn't call myself tech.
No, this is...
But I'm not great at social media.
No, this is a safe space. Don't stress about it. It's a very chill space. We're just going to be having a conversation. So you didn't ruin my show. Actually, I was just talking about how it's quite important, especially during this time, because I see a lot of students on the show, to take care of the mind, because most of the time we show up for the world before we show up for ourselves. And I think it's quite important. You can't give what you don't have. So if you don't show up for yourself, how do you expect to show up for everyone else, And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, because there's this notion in society that the more you are there for other people, the better of a person you are. But then if you're not there for yourself, then that doesn't really apply, So I was just speaking about that while we were waiting.
Yeah, absolutely, and I totally agree. We often like to use that analogy where you get on a plane and the oxygen masks come down. They always tell you to put your own one on first, because if you don't, you won't be in a position to help anyone else.
Exactly.
So really the message is that even if your whole goal in life is to help everyone, it requires you to also help yourself, because if you don't take care of yourself, you can't be a help to anyone else.
No, exactly. And I was also talking about focusing on the small victories, especially now that we're talking about mentally preparing for the third wave. With the first lockdown, my psychologist told me that it's important to focus on the small victories because they build up momentum to the bigger victories, because we are living through a pandemic. You can't expect to do the same things that you were doing under normal circumstances, but sometimes we feel like we still need to do above and beyond, irrespective of the things that we are dealing with. And COVID-19 has had a huge impact on mental health. The stats have been very, very alarming, and that's what we're going to be talking about today, how people can actually mentally prepare, because the last time it just happened. Now at least we can sort of prepare ourselves for the third wave, so we can be okay in terms of our mental health. So the first question that I do have for you, just for context, is what impact has COVID had on mental health? And from what you've seen, how has it changed from last year, and what impact will it have now, especially now that we're entering the third wave?
Well, I think it's great that you highlighted how it's changed as well, because I think the fact that it has had an impact on our mental health, of course, is probably obvious to most people, but I think we've seen quite a shift in how people were feeling. I remember when we were first level 5, a million years ago, back in those days, we had the 2-week lockdown, or that's what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
And everyone was quite, almost in a way, kind of positive, like, okay, we're going to get through this, everyone band together, we're in this together. And over time, I've seen that morph into a lot of frustration, a lot of anger, and then just a lot of exhaustion and just kind of exasperation, fatigue. And so what's also happened, I've noticed now as we approach wave 3, is that people have split into different kind of camps. So there's some people who still feel like, hey, we're in this together, guys. And then there's a lot of people who feel like, I just want to get on with my life. I actually don't care anymore. So get out of my way. Stop holding me back. And I think that's their reaction to the sort of, they're tired of having their perceived freedoms taken away, and they're tired of their life not being how they want it to be or being kind of normal, and so they've just become very sort of angry and frustrated. And I think that's unfortunately created quite a bit of a divide. So we're not seeing this sort of united front anymore. There's the people who still feel very afraid, very anxious, and there's the people who feel like the whole thing's totally overblown, and we just need to get on with it. So I think there's a lot of anger from both sides. The one side thinks the other side is being selfish, and the other side thinks the other ones are being, ridiculous. And I think it kind of requires that we have a lot of empathy for each other. I think that we can understand both perspectives. I think that we can understand the frustration and the fear. And I think as much as possible, we need to try and be understanding that everyone is feeling a little bit differently about this now. And that not everyone is experiencing this the same way.
And there's been a shift because in the beginning, like with the first lockdown, all of us were keeping track on the numbers, trying to see if it's gonna get worse, if it's gonna go down. Because like you're saying, we're all hopeful, we're a global community, literally trying to work towards the same goal, trying to keep track of the numbers, hoping that it will go down. But then as time shifted, you find that some stopped even tracking the numbers anymore because it left them feeling anxious and uncertain all the time. Could you explain that further, like the shift that happened?
Yeah, and I think that's a reaction to people's anxiety as well. Some people cope with anxiety by feeling more in control. So they like to track the numbers and track their areas, and the more they can gain a sense of control or some level of agency over this whole pandemic, it helps to make them feel a little bit more safe and secure. Then you get other people who just feel so overwhelmed, they want to kind of put their head in the sand, they don't want to read the news headlines, they don't want to turn on the TV, they don't want to see the numbers. So I think in that sense you have those two different camps in terms of how people deal with anxiety. And then you have the people who, for lack of a better term, I suppose, almost kind of lost interest. They kind of feel like, yeah, the numbers are bad, and then they're not bad, and then they're bad again. And I think those people are just desperate to return to normal life. They don't want COVID to be this feature that they think about all the time. They kind of want to live their life in spite of COVID. And I think those people just don't like to really engage with it much at all. They are trying to cling to that sense of normality. They want their old routines back. They want their old lives back.
But then what is the proper coping mechanism? So you get the people that have completely shut off, you get the people that are still keeping track, and then you get the people that don't care. But then when we think about it, I feel like it's all stemming from the same sort of feeling of anxiety, where you get tired of feeling that sort of anxiety. But what is the correct coping mechanisms for it? Because I see a lot of people saying the anxiety stems from isolation and uncertainty, and eventually you get to a point where you're constantly feeling like that, and then you look at the news and it's not getting any better. Then you get the camps, the 3 different camps. But what coping mechanisms are those healthy coping mechanisms for those that say, I don't care, I'm never going to look at this again? Those that actually can't watch it for their own mental health and for their own sake. And then you get those people that are constantly keeping up. But what coping mechanisms should we adopt in order to deal with this? Because I believe that we cannot be in the loop about what's happening in our world. We cannot be in the loop about what's happening, but at the same time, we need to protect our mental health. So what is the middle ground there?
Yeah, I think that you're right, and that coping mechanisms are exactly that. They help us cope. But there's also this thing where when you swing too far in one direction, coping mechanisms do become unhealthy. And they also are unique to people in terms of how they like to deal with things. So I think that as long as your coping mechanism doesn't become a source of anxiety in and of itself, you're probably doing okay. If it helps you to feel like you have a little bit of control, just tracking the numbers, great. If you find yourself checking the numbers every 10 minutes and drawing up schedules and consumed by anxiety, then maybe it's something you need to think, actually, this isn't really healthy for me. So I think for most of us, I think there's a need to sort of accept that our control is limited, and our control is kind of contained to our own sphere of influence. We can't control things on a global level, but we can do the things that help us feel safe. And that's different for everyone. Obviously, we are all mandated to wear masks and do our part and things like that, but in terms of your own environment, in terms of your own house, how much contact you want to have with people, whether or not, for example, you want to go to restaurants or gatherings, things that you're allowed to do, but different people have different comfort levels on things like that. So we have our own sphere of influence there where we get to kind of choose how much we want to engage in certain things, but we also need to accept that this is something that we have to live through and see to the other side, and that we can't necessarily have a drastic change on the global or context or even the national context. We can only control our own small sphere of influence.
No, that's very true. And from COVID, a lot of people are struggling with fatigue, with a lot of fatigue. So how do you combat COVID fatigue? Because again, the reason why I was talking about the small victories earlier is because I had that, and I still wanted to go above and beyond, irrespective of how I felt physically and mentally as well. So how do you combat COVID fatigue?
Well, I think what you highlighted there is great, right? That's how you kind of combat it, was by saying, okay, what do I have control over? What can I seize control of, and what can I accept that I don't have control over? I'll always encourage people to allow themselves to feel what they feel. It's okay to be sick of it. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to feel like, oh, I don't feel like this anymore. You have to allow yourself to have those feelings as well. And it's okay. Allow yourself to express that frustration. Allow yourself to feel that frustration. But at the same time, I think you want to create as much predictability, as much routine in your life as possible. I think what makes people feel fatigue is this constant sense of not knowing what's coming next. So just when you think things are going back to normal, now you hear on the news people are talking about wave 3 and it's going to be so bad, and there's a new variant coming out of India, and all this stuff that just makes you freak out and think, is this ever going to end? And so I think it's important within your own world to create as much, I want to say predictability, as much consistency as possible. So that regardless of what's happening with COVID and in the world, that your day-to-day looks mostly the same, that you can trust what your days are going to look like, that you are still maintaining your own sense of happiness, the things that are important to you. So just to try and carve out your own sort of niche of predictability and consistency. For a lot of people, that helps them to feel safe and secure. People thrive on routine and predictability because it just makes us feel safe and contained. So if you are someone who feels very anxious and very fatigued by this constant instability and constant unpredictability, do your best to take stock of what you can control in your own daily life and to try and make it as predictable for yourself as possible. And block out some of that white noise of all the things that you can't control.
Exactly. Have the willingness to accept the things that are within your control, and the ability to accept the things that aren't. And with COVID fatigue, many are struggling now with the third wave. Many are struggling with the changes that might come with the third wave, the uncertainty that might come with the third wave. What tips or tools can you give them to sort of manage that, or to deal with the uncertainty and the possible anxiety that they may feel?
Yeah, it's so hard because, again, it comes down to this thing where it is a source of anxiety, and there isn't necessarily just something you can do to take that away. Anxiety is part of our human experience, and this is something that we're all living through. So I would encourage people to allow themselves to vent, allow themselves to talk through it, lean on others, go to your support system, go to your friends or family or people you care about. If you are feeling frustrated, if you need someone to talk to, there are people out there who can talk to you if you're really struggling. SADAG, for example, that I do a lot of work with, there's a toll-free number you can call and you can get help there, and they can refer you to people. But ultimately, if you feel like you're really struggling, then I do think it's important to reach out to others and to kind of remember that we're all in this together. You're not alone. A lot of people are feeling frustrated, a lot of people are struggling, and we're kind of all in this together. I know that sounds a little bit corny, but it's also the truth.
It's true.
I think that the isolation and feeling like you are just alone in your frustration and anxiety is what can really make you feel helpless. Sometimes it helps to know that other people are also sick of this and also not looking forward to figuring out whether they're going back to work or working from home or whatever the case may be. Unfortunately, when there is stuff that you can't predict and there's not a lot you can do to change that, I would always say look to others for support. look to others to kind of normalize your experience, that you're not going crazy, you're not alone in what you're feeling, that there are other people feeling the same way, and that can really help.
And I think the feeling, knowing that you're not alone, actually helps a lot, because you can feel very lonely during this time, because some people live alone. Some people, especially imagine during level 5 lockdown, you were alone the whole time. So just remembering that we're all in this together, I think that's one thing that COVID did. It brought us together to have a collective fight. What are some of the things that we can do to look after our mental health during the third wave?
So I think it's a very good question, and it's a very important question. And I think that in a lot of ways it's very important that people ask themselves that question, in the sense that, like I said earlier, what makes you anxious, what you struggle to cope with is kind of different for everyone. Some people struggle with the sort of lack of social contact, for example. Some people really struggle with working from home. Some people love working from home. And so I think it's important to identify what is lacking in your life because of COVID, and what you can do to get a little bit more of that. So if you, for example, are really missing social contact, are there people you know that you feel safe being with? Can you organize the venerable Zoom trivia quiz? Can you reach out to others? Or if you are working from home and you really, really struggle with that, I always recommend that people set aside a space in their home that's just for work, because otherwise the lines get blurred. If you're working on your laptop in bed, you're never really not at work, and then you're never really at home.
Yeah.
So have a space that's just for you. This is where you work, and when you get up from that space, it's almost like you're leaving the office. And then you can go and sit on the couch, close your laptop, and then you're actually away from work. So if you need to take a break in the middle of the day, if you need to feel like you're not at work, do that. So there's lots of little things that everyone can do, but it's important to identify what your needs are that aren't being met, and then take steps towards making sure those needs is different for everyone, but keep some of those things in mind. If you hate working from home, what is it that you hate about working from home? Maybe it's that you feel like you're always at the office. Cool, then create a separate space. Social contact, maybe missing routine or predictability. Try and create some routine in your life if you're missing that. So, I'd encourage everyone to kind of look inwards in that sense. And what has COVID taken away from me, and how can I get it back?
Yeah. And it's taken a lot out of all of us. One thing that's showing up a lot, especially in the comments, are like feelings of anxiety and panic. And what I think most people, especially when it comes to panic and anxiety, people want to know what signs to look out for so they can know when they're checking in how to help themselves. So what are those? What signs can you look out for? Signs of panic and anxiety that you can say, okay, now this is getting a bit much. I need to bring it back a bit, or center myself, or get help, or call someone. What can they look out for?
In terms of extreme anxiety and panic, it's often quite a physical experience. So I always encourage people to look out for that. Stuff like hyperventilating or breathing very quickly. Maybe you feel like your heart is racing. Chest pain, a massive percentage of people who go to hospital every year for chest pain actually just have anxiety, and they have nothing wrong with their heart. So keep an eye for stuff like that. Even stuff like an upset stomach, it's a very physical experience. So if you're feeling something like that just feels panicked or overwhelmed, it could very well be anxiety. And those sort of physical symptoms are really an indication that your anxiety is kind of in overdrive and you're not coping. And I'd encourage everyone in that space to just sort of try and find a quiet space to work through that, allow yourself to feel it, talk yourself through it, identify what you're feeling in your physical space, and just kind of connect with it, and just allow yourself to kind of breathe through that, if that makes sense. It's important not to try and force that anxiety aside or tell yourself that you're being stupid. Allow yourself to feel it. I always say, like, if anxiety is, if you're sitting watching a lion pace around a cage and then it walks outside the cage, now you feel anxiety. The only thing that can make you more anxious is how you have to put the lion back in the cage. So don't try and suppress your anxiety. Let that lion walk around and he'll go back when he's ready. Just connect with what you're feeling and allow yourself to feel it. But in terms of other changes, I always encourage people when it comes to stuff like depression or not coping, we often imagine someone curled in a ball crying, and to tell you the truth, that's not always what depression is like. Look for changes in your, are you having trouble sleeping? Are you sleeping too much? Are you eating more? Are you eating less? A big one is irritability. People think of depression as sadness, but oftentimes it's irritability. Do you find yourself snappy with people, especially your loved ones or friends? You're more snippy, you're more irritable. You know yourself better than anyone. So look out for changes in yourself. If you're acting away, just like, this is not me. Why am I so grumpy? Why am I so off? You know, it's a sort of a sign to yourself, hey, maybe look inwards and just make sure that you're doing okay, because maybe you're struggling.
Which brings it back to the important. No, I was just agreeing with you, saying it brings it back to the importance of just checking in, and I love the fact that you said allow yourself to feel that, because more often than not we don't allow ourselves to feel that, because when you feel feelings of anxiety or panic or just sadness because of the pandemic, you feel weak, like there's these negative words that are associated with it, so you feel like, no, I need to rise above it. But if you allow yourself to feel it and you allow yourself to go through it, it comes and then it goes, and then you can, like I always say, a bad day doesn't mean a bad life. And it doesn't mean a bad life, but one thing that you said that I think the people that are watching need to remember is that you need to allow yourself to feel all of those emotions, because they are valid. Don't invalidate your feelings. I have a few questions from the audience that I have compiled. So the first one is, I have managed to keep my family safe during the first and the second wave, but I feel like our luck has run out, and that statistically one of us is going to get sick, and I'm petrified. So what do you say to a person like that who is scared that a family member is going to get sick? Because those are, especially in April, we were seeing so many rest in pieces and all of those things, and those are the things that we see, and you get petrified because it could be anyone. So what do you say to that person?
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's it's a rational fear, in the sense that we've been exposed to so much in terms of illness and horrible stories, and I think that, statistically, Shame, I guess statistically they're no more likely to get it now. There isn't really luck, and the truth is, once more people have had it and more people have been vaccinated, which is the case now, in a way you're less likely to get it. But I know that raw statistics don't necessarily suit someone's state of mind. I think it's just one of those things where, in the same way that we might worry about a family member getting into a car and going to work every day, or being a victim of some terrible accident or crime or something like that, there's so many things that are outside of our control, but the way our brain works is that we perceive these threats as immediate. So even though you may statistically be more likely to die in a car accident than to COVID, because COVID is something new and something that we're not used to and something scary, it scares us a lot more. But in this, so I hope I don't make this person more anxious now, but all the terrible things that can happen. But I guess what I'm saying is just rather that there's so much that we don't have control over. And, in the same way with cars, we drive safely, we wear our seatbelts, we take precautions, we don't drink and drive, all these kinds of things. It's the same with COVID. It is this threat that does exist, and all you can do is sort of take control of all the things that you can take control of, and just do your best to know that you are doing the absolute best that you can to protect yourself and your family. And that's all that can be expected of you, and to just remember that there is treatment out there. If anyone does get sick, we have access to treatment. We've been treating this for a long time. We know what we're doing now. So, you are safer now than you probably ever have been in the history of COVID thus far. The longer this goes on, the better it gets. So we just got to keep riding it out and doing what we can control, I guess.
And in the same line of questioning, someone is saying, I've lost so many family friends and people I know to COVID that I now feel numb to it all. I can't cry anymore. I can't feel sad anymore. Is that normal? Is something wrong with me?
Shame, no, absolutely, that's normal. And I would also say that no one can really tell you how to grieve or what is or isn't normal, but I can also say that is a very common response. We can absolutely get just so numbed and overcome with grief that we just struggle to really connect with our feelings. It just becomes too overwhelming. And it's a way of kind of protecting yourself from all of that pain, is just to sort of go numb to it. What I would say is that it's important that you try and give yourself a chance to process that. Try and give yourself space to mourn, space to grieve, because it is important to not suppress those feelings forever. But that being said, when things are overwhelming, it is okay to take a little bit of a time out and just say, I can't actually deal with this right now. And it sounds like that's where you're at. And don't be alarmed, it doesn't mean that you are insensitive or cold-hearted. It's completely normal. It actually means that you care so much it's become unbearable for you. So just remember to try and give yourself the space to grieve when you need to, because suppressing feelings is always a bad idea. Long term.
And maybe one thing I always talk about is journaling. Maybe just try to write it down. If you can't say it, if you can't articulate it, try to just write it down. It doesn't always have to make sense. It really doesn't. Just so you can just get it out, and then when you read it out, if you want to read it out, you actually don't have to read it. That is a way that I think also helps if anyone wants to try that as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Externalizing your feelings in that way. Sorry, I just want to highlight that it's a really, really great idea.
Yeah.
Some people do art. That's another way of externalizing your internal experience. So, yeah, if you struggle to talk about it, you struggle to connect with it yourself, those are fantastic ideas. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
No, that's something that I also do. I think it's great, especially if you don't have access to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. At least you've got some outlet to let everything out. The last question that I have for you, I think it's a big one for so many people. I'm worried about my finances during this time. How can I minimize my stress in that regard?
Sure. I think it's a good question without a very satisfactory answer. I think the sad truth is that financial stress is one of the biggest stresses in the world. It's the one that probably the most people can relate to, regardless of their walk of life. I think everyone has probably felt financial stress at some point, and it is all-consuming and truly, truly awful. I think that it's such a hard thing to deal with, because the only real solution, it feels like, is, okay, I need more money, then I won't be worrying about this anymore. And I think that the only thing that I would really advise that you can do is, again, just to try and gain as much control over it as you can, as much perspective over it as you can. So obviously I don't know everyone's unique financial situation, but just to try and give themselves some measure of control. So stuff like writing things out, planning things out, drawing up lists of expenses and things like that. It's very practical, but anything that gives you some measure of, okay, I have this under control, and that breaks it up into much more digestible parts, is generally a lot better. When something just feels big and overwhelming, something just as huge as financial stress, this big blinking red light, it can just feel too much to deal with. So if you can break it up into smaller issues and give you a much better understanding of what exactly needs to be done and what you need to do to get through it, it can make it feel a lot more manageable. Generally, when it's one big stress like that, that isn't really clearly defined, it becomes very, very overwhelming and oftentimes paralyzing. You just feel like you can't face it, you can't do anything about it, and you just actually struggle to move forward from that. So my main suggestion would be to try to break it up into more manageable parts to sort of process.
No, I think that will be helpful for a lot of people. Any last words that you'd like to say to people in terms of mentally preparing for the third wave?
I think I'll just go back to what that person asked when they said, is it normal? I just want to say that however you feel is how you feel. Remember, you can control your actions, you can't control your feelings. So never gatekeep your feelings, never berate yourself and say, oh, I shouldn't feel this way, or I'm being ridiculous, or I'm overreacting, anything like that. You don't get to choose how you feel. And we all deal with things in our own unique way, so there is no wrong feeling. We can control our actions, we can control our behaviors, and that is what we can judge ourselves on. But when it comes to our feelings, we don't get to choose how we feel. So just allow yourself to feel what you feel, allow yourself to work through it. And yeah, we're going through enough right now without us criticizing ourselves for how we're managing or how we're coping or how we're feeling. So just be kind to yourself. And also, I would say by that token, be kind to others recognize that not everyone is coping the same way. You might think COVID is no big deal. Some people are really, really scared and they can't control the fact that they feel really scared. So just be kind to others, recognize that everyone's experiencing this thing differently, and just have empathy for yourself, kindness for yourself, and empathy for others as well.
I think I couldn't have said it better myself. And one thing that I will say that you said earlier is that we are all in this together. We are literally all in this together. So don't feel like you're alone. You're not alone. We're all in this together. And there's help available. It feels like the tips that we gave you today on helping these, like if you're saying SADC has a 24-hour counseling line. If you feel like it's getting too much, give them a call. I'll post their number after the live, so you can just have that on hand. But you're not alone. We're all in this together, and it's okay to not be okay. Like you're saying, allow yourself to feel the feelings that you're feeling. Don't invalidate yourself. We're living through a pandemic. Please do not forget that we're living through a pandemic. And with that being said, please don't forget to wear your masks, to sanitize, and to wash your hands, to social distance. Yes, the vaccines are being rolled out, but we still need to practice collective kindness and responsibility towards one another to just protect one another. So thank you so much, Chris, for coming through tonight, and thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. I really enjoyed talking to you, and thank you so much to every single person that tuned in tonight.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.